Imagine a society where the government's treasury is just overflowing, like a sudden $6 billion cash injection.
Right. A massive influx of capital.
Exactly. And the legislature is passing all its major bills with just, absolute structural dominance. But simultaneously, the literal ground beneath their feet is burning.
Yeah, 500,000 hectares of land just locked down.
Locked down under emergency orders. And the demographic core of their population is quietly projecting this massive structural drain.
It's a complete paradox.
It really is. You have a society that is immensely wealthy on paper, but physically and, well, fundamentally cracking at the foundation.
Yeah.
Today, we aren't just looking at how the Canadian province of Quebec navigated this exact highly polarized paradox during the second week of July 2026.
No, we're taking it a step further.
We are looking at whether an ancient mathematical divination system actually predicted every single one of those crises days before they even happened.
Which is, it's the ultimate stress test for any predictive model, right? We are taking a rigid, structured geomantic chart 1 that was cast manually on July 3rd, so before this week even began, and we're holding it up against the hard, documented news cycle of July 6th through July 12th.
The actual verifiable events.
Exactly. We're looking at the traditional 12 astrological houses, the 16 Latin figures of geomancy, and the complex astro-geomantic overlay. And we are grading the architecture of this chart.
Didn't know what was coming.
Yeah, and more importantly, didn't know exactly where the pressure would fracture the system.
I am so incredibly excited to share this with you today. If you're joining us for this deep dive, you know that we love to take a stack of sources and extract the absolute core of what matters.
And underlying mechanics.
Exactly. But today is special because, this isn't theoretical. We aren't dealing in those vague, open-ended prophecies that you can just twist to mean whatever you want.
Right, no cold reading here.
None at all. We're doing a retrospective analysis of mundane geomancy, and mundane meaning the astrology and geomancy of world events and politics rather than, like, individual people.
Yeah, the macro level.
Right. We have a highly specific weekly chart, and we are comparing it to the actual events on the ground.
The core philosophy here is that knowledge is most valuable when it's deeply understood and, practically applied.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because anyone can look back at a chaotic week of news and try to make sense of it after the fact. But when you overlay a mathematical symbolic structure like geomancy onto that timeline,
You start to see the gears turning.
exactly. You see the underlying mechanics of reality, the gears beneath the news cycle. So our job today is structural analysis. We're looking at the blueprint of this specific week in Quebec to see if the ancient figures align with the modern data.
And before we get into the data, I think we should set the stage regarding the events themselves, because this week in Quebec's history touches on some incredibly intense, highly charged political and social issues.
It was a very heavy week.
It's very heavy. We're talking about massive labor disputes between millions of unionized workers and the provincial government. We're talking about really controversial legislation regarding involuntary psychiatric detainment.
Yes, civil liberties issues.
Huge ones. And incredibly heated debates over foreign corporate ownership of renewable energy. So, to be completely transparent with you, our goal here is not to validate any political platform.
Right. We're not taking sides.
Not at all. We are going to examine the government's actions, the union's counteractions, and the civil liberties disputes purely as systemic forces.
It's the only way to conduct a rigorous case study, really.
Yeah, we're treating these events as structural inputs to see how they match the geomantic outputs.
Because when you're assessing a predictive structure, bias is just the enemy of clarity.
Oh, 100%.
If we want to know if the figure of carcer, which, translates to prison or enclosure, if we want to know if that accurately predicted a legislative move, we have to look at the mechanics of the legislation itself.
Regardless of how we feel about the policy.
Exactly. Our personal feelings don't matter to the math.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the moment you look at the raw data of this chart from July 3rd, it just screams a massive contradiction at you.
It really does.
Let's start with the overarching thesis the chart presented before the week even started. We are looking at a system of 16 possible geomantic figures, right? Each made up of lines of single or double dots representing different elemental energies.
Yeah. Earth, air, fire, water.
Right. And in a standard chart, you have 12 houses, just like in astrology.
Yeah.
But in this chart for Quebec, we have what you called a threshold week.
A threshold week, yeah.
What exactly does that mean in the context of these ancient figures?
So a threshold week implies a point of no return. It's a structural shift where one state of being is bleeding out and another is trying to take form.
Okay.
And to understand why this chart screams threshold, we have to look at the first house.
You said that.
Right. In mundane analysis, the first house represents the core identity of the society, the public mood, the physical vitality of the people as a collective whole. And the figure that landed in the first house for this week is Cauda Draconis.
The dragon's tail, which historically is not a figure you want showing up in the house of your vitality, is it?
No, definitely not. Cauda Draconis is the exiting node, right? The south node of the moon.
Yeah.
In traditional geomancy, its fundamental nature is an outflow, a draining away, a depletion of energy.
Like a leak.
Exactly like a leak. It's not necessarily violent, but it is inexorable. It represents something at the foundational level of Quebec's collective self-presentation just ending or leaking away.
Why?
So right out of the gate, the chart tells us that the province is experiencing a massive drain on its core identity and vitality.
But here is where the cognitive dissonance kicks in for me. Because the identity is draining, yes. But then you look at the financial and legislative houses, and they are incredibly robust.
Super robust, yeah.
You mentioned that this chart is anchored by double figures, figures that repeat in multiple houses, weighting the chart's energy. Can you break down the 3 double figures that define this week?
Sure. So when a figure repeats, it acts like a structural pillar for the entire time frame. It means that specific energetic signature is demanding your attention in multiple areas of life.
It's emphasizing that theme.
Exactly. And in this chart, we have 3 of these pillars. The first double figure is Fortuna Major, the greater fortune.
That sounds good.
It is. It's a figure of fire ruled by the sun. It signifies enduring success, stable strength, and protected advancement. And it landed in House 2.
Which governs the treasury, right? The economy?
The economy, the province's assets, yeah. And it also landed in House 11, which rules the legislature, the government's allies, and its long-term structural ambitions.
So on paper, the money is great and the lawmakers are winning.
Precisely. The second double figure kind of adds to this positive veneer. We have Letitia, which translates to joy or happiness.
Another good one.
Yeah, another figure of fire, this one ruled by Jupiter. It signifies uplift, grace, public optimism, relief from pressure.
Okay, and where did joy land?
It landed in House 3, which is the sphere of communications, local media, short-distance travel. And it also landed in House 6, which is crucial here. The House of Labor, the civil service, the unions, and public health.
Okay, wait, so the treasury has greater fortune, the legislature has greater fortune, the media has joy, and the labor force has joy.
Right.
If I stop right there, I'm thinking, wow, what an incredible week for Quebec. Everyone is rich, everyone is happy.
You'd think so.
But then we hit the third double figure, and this is where the bottom just falls out.
This is the anchor dropping. The third double figure is carcer, the prison or the enclosure.
Oof!
Yeah. It's a figure of Earth ruled by Saturn. It signifies stagnation, freezing, confinement, being trapped, or being held under extreme constraint.
And where does this heavy Saturnian prism land?
House 4 and House 12.
Okay, so House 4 is the physical land, the Earth itself, the roots of the province, the weather, the natural resources.
Exactly.
And House 12 is the house of hidden institutions. The hospitals, the prisons, covert bureaucratic pressures, all the things kept out of the public eye.
So when you synthesize these 3 double figures, you get this deeply paradoxical society.
Yeah.
The financial ledgers look incredible, and the labor force is experiencing a moment of uplift. But the actual physical earth they stand on is trapped and constrained.
Wow.
And their hidden institutional vulnerabilities are completely locked down in a Saturnian prison. And, all of this is happening while the core identity of the province in House 1 is bleeding out through the dragon's tail.
This setup is so striking, it makes me think of a very specific analogy.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you were examining the life of a highly successful, astronomically wealthy CEO. They're at the absolute peak of their career. Their bank accounts, so House 2, are absolutely overflowing with new acquisitions.
Right, Fortuna Major.
Yes, exactly. Their position on the board of directors, House 11, is fully protected and legislatively secure. They even managed to negotiate a peace treaty with their disgruntled employees, which is House 6.
The joy in the House of Labor.
Yes. So by all external metrics, they are winning. But then they get a call from their contractor. The literal physical foundation of their multi-million-dollar mansion House 4 is cracking, it's sinking into the earth, and structurally failing.
The cursor.
And simultaneously, they are sitting in a therapist's office realizing they don't know who they are anymore, experiencing a profound soul-draining identity crisis. That's house one.
Yeah, that's the Cauda Draconis strain.
Right, so their wealth is real, but their foundation is collapsing, and their sense of self is leaking away.
That analogy operates perfectly on multiple levels, especially when we start layering in the astrological overlay later on. Because what you were describing is a scenario where the material wealth does not cancel out the foundational rot.
Right, they exist at the same time.
They aren't mutually exclusive, yeah. The CEO doesn't stop being rich just because the foundation is cracking, and the foundation doesn't magically fix itself just because a new deposit hits the bank.
The chart just isolates these forces into their respective houses.
Exactly. It shows you the compartments.
So that is the theory. That is the X-ray the Geomancer cast on July 3rd, predicting a week of extreme, isolated contradictions. Now, we need to look at the hard bone of reality.
The actual events.
Yes, I'm going to walk you through the actual news cycle of this exact week, July 6th to July 12th, 2026.
Yeah.
And I want you to pay attention to the sheer diversity of the events taking place in just a 7-day window.
Lay it out. Let's see the reality we are testing against.
Event number one, the environment. Wildfires in Quebec exploded at an unprecedented rate. The burned area went from roughly 9,300 hectares to over 530,000 hectares in a matter of days.
That is massive.
To put that in perspective, 530,000 hectares is a huge chunk of vital boreal forest. And in response, the government had to drop a massive open fire ban, locking down 9 entire administrative regions.
Total lockdown.
Yeah. Event number two, organized labor. 9 major trade unions representing 1.5 million workers, which is a massive portion of the province's workforce, escalated their fight against the government's Bill 4.
And Bill 4 was about urban planning, right?
Well, the government argued it would modernize urban planning and governance, yeah. But the unions argued it stripped them of fundamental collective bargaining rights.
Right.
So the unions didn't just strike. They filed a formal international labor complaint to the ILO, the International Labor Organization, elevating a provincial dispute to a global tribunal.
Which is a huge structural move.
Exactly. Event number 3, international finance and energy. An American private equity firm, KKR, executed a staggering $6 billion Canadian deal to buy a 1/3 stake in Quebec's wind energy capacity from a major developer.
Massive capital influx.
Flooded the province with foreign capital, but it sparked massive debates about losing sovereignty over critical green infrastructure. Event number 4, civil liberties and mental health. The government pushed forward Bill 23, a highly controversial piece of legislation that modified health and social services.
A psychiatric detainment bill.
Yes. The most contentious part of this bill was that it expanded the government's power for forced, involuntary psychiatric hospitalizations, making it easier to detain individuals deemed a risk without their explicit consent.
Very heavy institutional action there.
Extremely. Event number 5, digital infrastructure. On the exact morning that thousands of high school students across the province were supposed to log into the Ministry of Education's digital portal to receive their final exam results, the entire system crashed.
On the most important day.
A total, unmitigated digital blackout on a high-stakes day for the province's youth. And finally, event number 6, demographics.
Ah, the ISQ data.
Yeah. The ISQ, the Institut de la Statistique du Québec, the official provincial statistical agency, released long-term demographic projections. Their data showed a looming major population decline, specifically for the island of Montreal, projecting a 4.5% drain by 2051.
If we look at the spread of those events, the complexity is just staggering.
It's all over the map.
We are not looking at a single crisis cascading through a society. We are looking at completely disconnected sectors acting simultaneously. I mean, the physical environment is quite literally on fire.
Yeah.
The labor force is utilizing international legal mechanisms. Wall Street is absorbing sovereign renewable energy assets. The mental health and civil liberties sectors are clashing over the ethics of physical detention. And the basic bureaucratic IT infrastructure is failing.
Exactly. It's a multi-front reality. So the ultimate question for our geomantic stress test is this. Did the chart know exactly where these hits would land?
Right.
Did it map the environmental chaos to the environmental house, the financial influx to the financial house, and the institutional failure to the institutional house?
Well, let's run the scorecard. According to the analysis of the sources, the chart produced 7 strong, exact hits.
7. Let's dive right into House 4, because this is arguably the most dramatic and honestly counterintuitive hit in the entire chart. House 4 is the land, the roots, the physical environment, the weather, and the literal soil of the province.
Right. And as we established, the figure occupying House 4 is carcer, the prison, confinement, immobility, and a territory held under severe constraint.
Yeah.
Now, geomancy doesn't just stop at the figures. It integrates with astrology through an overlay. Using the traditional dignity system, House 4 in this specific chart corresponds to the zodiac sign of Cancer.
Okay.
And within Cancer, we have 3 planetary placements to consider. We have the Sun, which is peregrine.
Meaning what exactly, for those unfamiliar with the term?
So peregrine just means wandering.
Yeah.
A planet that is peregrine has no essential dignity. It's not in its home sign, it's not exalted, but it's also not in its detriment or fall.
Right.
It's like a traveler in a foreign city with no local currency and no friends. It lacks the resources to act strongly. So the Sun here is just drifting. But more importantly, we have Saturn in detriment and Mars in fall.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and where I actually have to push back on the interpretation a bit.
Go for it.
Carcer is fundamentally Saturnian. It means frozen, stuck, enclosed, like ice or stone or a literal cave.
Yes.
But the reality of House 4 this week was a wildfire that burned 500,000 hectares. Fire is the exact opposite of frozen. Fire is kinetic, it's moving, it's consuming, it's spreading wildly.
It's highly active, yes.
So how on earth can a divination system claim that Carcer, a frozen prison, is an accurate hit for a massive uncontrollable wildfire?
It is a brilliant question, and it gets to the absolute core of how geomantic figures interact with the planetary overlay to describe complex mechanics.
Okay, explain it to me.
You are entirely correct that carcer alone implies stagnation and enclosure. But we have to look at how a society responds to the emergency and what actually happens to the land.
Right.
When the fires exploded, the province didn't just let them burn. They responded by implementing a massive, rigid, legally enforced fire ban across 9 distinct administrative regions.
The lockdown.
The land itself was legally and physically sealed off. Human movement into the boreal forest was strictly prohibited. The territory was locked down. That administrative and physical enclosure is carcer.
Okay, I see that. But my question remains, why is it burning in the first place?
To answer that, we look at the planets in the overlay. We have Mars, the planet of heat, aggression, friction, and destruction, sitting in fall in the sign of Cancer.
So what does in fall mean mechanically?
When a planet is in its fall, it doesn't lose its inherent nature. Rather, it expresses its nature in its most weakened, erratic, depressed, and uncontrolled state.
So it's like a corrupted version of itself.
Exactly. It's like a person who is exhausted and stressed. They don't stop being themselves, but their worst traits come out because they lack the energy to regulate themselves.
Wow, okay.
Mars in fall is destructive force without disciplined containment. It is erratic heat. And to compound this, Saturn, the planet that represents structure, boundaries, and containment, is in detriment.
So Saturn is essentially exiled, operating in enemy territory where it can't enforce the rules.
Exactly. Saturn's ability to contain is structurally compromised. So map the mechanics. You have a Mars-driven, explosive, uncontrolled destruction because Mars is in fall. The structures meant to contain it fail because Saturn is in detriment.
Oh, wow.
And the ultimate result of this fiery chaos is that the land itself, the House 4 environment, is placed into a Saturnian lockdown, a carcer, by the government to manage the disaster.
That is, wow. So the land isn't frozen by ice. It is immobilized by the emergency measures and the severe ecological degradation caused by the fire. The Earth is trapped by the consequences of the heat.
Exactly.
That is incredibly nuanced, and it actually aligns perfectly with the other piece of House 4 news from that week.
The housing data.
Yes, the ISQ released data projecting that the physical housing demand, literal buildings on the land, is going to remain structurally strained for years.
Yeah.
Plus, the government had to announce a $25.5 million project just to restore degraded, failing wetlands.
Right, more physical constraints.
The physical foundation of the province, whether it's forests, wetlands, or housing developments, is under severe, multi-layered pressure and constraint.
Which makes it a textbook hit for the architecture of the chart. The Oracle identified the exact nature of the pressure on the physical environment. Now let's trace that emergency into House 8.
House 8. This is the house of crisis, mortality, shared resources, and emergency management. How a society deals with existential threats.
Right, and the figure in House 8 is acquisitio, which means gain or acquisition. It's a figure of fire ruled by Jupiter, and it is usually considered highly positive. It signifies profit, expansion, gathering wealth, and obtaining what you seek.
But again, we're talking about a devastating wildfire emergency. How does gain map onto a crisis that is burning 500,000 hectares of natural resources?
This is a prime example of the dynamics of a figure being fundamentally altered by the house it occupies.
Okay, how so?
Acquisitio signifies accumulation, gathering material resources into a pile. But when you place that accumulating, gathering energy into House 8, the house of crisis and emergency, the nature of the gain transforms. It becomes compulsory accumulation.
What does that look like on the ground?
Look at the reality of the week's crisis response. To fight fires of that scale, the province required the extraordinary rapid mobilization of resources.
Right.
They had to acquire aerial water tankers, they had to gather ground crews, they had to issue interprovincial mutual aid requests to pull in firefighters from outside Quebec.
And federal coordination, right?
Yes, federal coordination to gather military logistical support. The crisis sphere of the government was actively acquiring massive, unprecedented amounts of disaster resources.
I see. So it's not a gain in wealth or prosperity. It's a gain in emergency resources being pulled into the black hole of a crisis.
Precisely. The emergency was growing exponentially faster than the initial response capabilities, meaning the crisis was consuming everything thrown at it, demanding more and more acquisition.
So the positive aspect is neutralized.
The inherently positive, profitable nature of acquisitio is entirely neutralized by the existential threat of House 8. It produces the paradox of massive resource flow, huge amounts of money and equipment being deployed, with absolutely zero net gain for the province.
You're spending a fortune just to stop a loss.
Exactly. It is a brilliant structural match for disaster logistics.
That brings us to House 12, which I think is another incredible, undeniable hit. House 12 is often considered one of the most difficult houses. It governs hidden institutions, prisons, hospitals, covert bureaucratic pressures, and things operating in the shadows of a society.
And the figure here is our second carcer, prison.
Yes.
And the Astro-geomantic overlay here is equally profound, providing the exact mechanism of the hit. House 12 in this chart falls in the sign of Pisces.
Okay.
The moon is here, peregrine, just receptive, fluid, wandering. But Mercury is also here. And in traditional astrology, Mercury in Pisces is in both detriment and fall simultaneously.
Double nobility.
It is at its maximum possible weakness. Mercury rules communication, data, rational process, articulation, and connection.
Right.
When the planet of communication is in double debility in the house of hidden things and ruled by the figure of prison, it means that communications within the institutional sphere are going to be severely disrupted, broken, or intentionally obscured.
And the reality of the week delivers on both the literal and the bureaucratic interpretation of that.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's look at Bill 3 first. The Quebec government clarified rules expanding the grounds for forced involuntary psychiatric hospitalization. They made it easier for medical and state authorities to detain individuals without their consent if they are deemed a risk to themselves or others.
That is literal, physical, involuntary enclosure.
It really is. That is the purest real-world manifestation of carcer and the house of hospitals and prisons that you could possibly ask for.
But where does the debilitated Mercury come in?
The civil liberties groups, they were protesting this bill specifically because of the lack of clear due process communication. They argued that the legal mechanisms allowing a human being to be forcibly confined were dangerously vague. The communication of rights, the Mercury function, was structurally obscured and degraded within the institutional framework.
Which perfectly enacts the astrology. The rational communicative process is failing within a structure designed to enclose.
Yeah.
But the chart went even further because Mercury doesn't just rule legal language, it rules digital communications and data transfer.
The portal crash.
Yes.
On the morning of July 7th, thousands of high school students tried to log into the Ministry of Education's digital portal to get their final exam results. This is a massive data event for the province.
A huge deal for those kids.
And the system just completely collapsed. A total digital blackout on a high-stakes day.
Exactly. The province's digital institutional infrastructure, a system hidden from public view until the exact moment you needed to transmit data, failed completely. It effectively locked students out of their own academic records.
Unbelievable.
So you have Mercury in fall, governing broken digital data, operating within a carcer house, locking people out. It is stunningly literal on two completely different fronts: mental health detainment and IT failure.
It's almost unsettling how accurately that maps. But, let's shift away from the crises and look at the good news. Because the chart did promise some robust positives, and it actually delivered.
Right, the other double figures.
Let's look at House 6 and House 11. House 6 covers labor, public health, the daily grind of the civil service workforce, and the unions. House 11 covers the legislature, the government's allies, and high-level institutional honors.
For House 6, the figure is Letitia, joy. For House 11, it is Fortuna Major, greater fortune. These are two of the most robustly positive, expansive figures in the entire geomantic system.
And the news mapped to these houses incredibly cleanly. For House 6, representing labor, we saw a massive win for the broader workforce. Unemployment dropped to 5.4%, which significantly outperformed the national average.
More people working.
Exactly. We also saw the PQ immigration pathway, the Programme de l'Expérience Québécoise, finally reopened for temporary foreign workers and graduates after being closed or restricted for months. This was a massive relief for the workforce and for businesses desperate for labor.
Both of those events represent an opening of doors. Letitia signals relief, a brightening of conditions that were previously constrained, and a surge of optimism within the labor pool.
But the most fascinating hit for House 6 involves the unions. 9 major trade unions, representing 1.5 million workers, were locked in a bitter fight with the government over Bill 4.
Yeah, which doesn't sound very joyful.
Right. You might think a bitter fight contradicts Letitia. But look at what the unions actually did this week. They didn't just complain locally, they found an international voice.
The ILO complaint.
Exactly. They filed a formal complaint with the ILO in Geneva. Even though they were fighting their employer, the act of uniting 1.5 million workers and finding a higher global tribunal to hear their case is a moment of immense uplift and agency for the labor movement.
They took control of the narrative.
Yes, they found their joy in collective action.
That is a crucial nuance. Letitia in the House of Labor doesn't mean the labor force loves the government. It means the labor force itself experiences an expansive, positive, empowering event. Elevating their struggle to an international stage provides exactly that empowering relief.
And for House 11, the legislature, the hits are just as direct. We saw the CAQ government successfully pass Bill 23 through the National Assembly.
So they won the vote.
They did. Regardless of how civil liberties groups felt about the bill, structurally, it represents the government's legislative program advancing with full institutional force. They got their way.
Fortuna Major.
Exactly. And even more directly tying to Fortuna Major, the Speaker of the Quebec National Assembly was elected President of the Assemblée Parlementaire de la Francophonie, the APF.
This is a perfect manifestation of House 11 energy. The APF is a global organization of French-speaking parliaments. Having the Quebec Speaker elected as president is an international, multilateral honor conferred directly upon the province's chief legislative officer.
It's a huge deal for them.
It is an elevation of status among allies. Enduring success. Fortuna Major.
It is genuinely remarkable how cleanly the positive figures caught the positive news, while the negative figures caught the crises. It's like the chart perfectly sorted the week's events into their proper folders.
Yeah, it organized the chaos.
But here is where we get to the real complexity of this deep dive. House 1 and House 2. The identity drain versus the treasury surge.
This is where geomancy demands synthesis. You cannot read these houses in isolation.
Right.
House 1, representing the core identity, public mood, and demographic vitality of the province, holds Astro-geomantic, the draining dragon's tail. House 2, representing the treasury, economic assets, and financial resources, holds Fortuna Major, the greater fortune.
And the reality of the week gave us 2 massive events that fit these houses perfectly. First, for House 1, the ISQ, the Provincial Statistics Agency released projections indicating a 4.5% population loss for the island of Montreal by 2051.
A very clear drain.
Yeah. Now, Montreal is the economic and cultural engine of the province. If the demographic core of your society is literally projected to drain away over the coming decades, that is a perfect hit for Astro-geomantic in House 1. The vitality is leaking.
Exactly. And simultaneously for House 2, the Treasury sees a massive, unprecedented injection of capital.
The KKR deal.
Yes. The American investment firm KKR buys a 1/3 stake in Quebec's wind energy capacity from a major developer. We are talking about a $6 billion transaction that is massive, stable financial activity flowing into the economic sphere.
So the gross financial figure is enormous, fitting Fortuna Major. But this is where the Girard of Sabioneta overlay provides a critical complication that bridges the gap between the money and the drain.
The Astro-geomantic link.
Explain how the math of the overlay connects these two houses.
The Astro-geomantic overlay assigns zodiac signs to the houses based on the figure that lands in the ascendant, or House 1. Because of how the specific mathematical generation works out in this chart, the overlay designates Taurus as the zodiacal backdrop for House 2.
Taurus being the natural sign of financial stability, agriculture, and rooted wealth.
Yes. Taurus is the soil that holds the money. But we have to remember what is happening in the chart as a whole. The primary figure of the chart, the ascendant figure setting the tone for everything, is Cauda Draconis.
The drain.
Right. So the overlay is essentially telling us that the stable wealth of Taurus in House 2 is deeply connected to and perhaps driven by the draining energy of the dragon's tail.
So you have the greater fortune sitting in the house of money, but the underlying dynamic of the entire chart is an outflow. How does that match the KKR deal?
Look at the mechanics of the transaction. The surface fortune is undeniably real. $6 billion is a colossal financial asset. But what is actually happening? It is an outflow of provincial energy sovereignty.
I see.
The wind farms themselves physically remain in Quebec, generating power. But the ownership, the financial leverage, and the long-term dividend profits are exiting the province, flowing south to an American private equity firm.
So they are trading control for cash.
The province is trading long-term sovereign ownership for a short-term massive cash injection. It is a stable Fortuna major masking a directional loss, which is Cauda Draconis.
That is so specific.
The sheer complexity of that economic reality is perfectly mirrored in the tension between the primary figure and the overlay.
Okay, we've gone through the exact hits, and they are impressive. But a stress test isn't honest if we only look at what worked perfectly.
Sure.
If we want to truly evaluate this X-ray, we have to look at the partial hits, and we have to look at the miss. Because there was one glaring, undeniable miss in this chart. House 9.
House 9 governs the courts, the legal system, higher learning, and long-distance or foreign affairs in a doctrinal or philosophical sense. And the figure that landed here was pure.
Pure translates to boy, or young male, or warrior. It's a figure of fire ruled by Mars. It is aggressive, combative, impulsive, and eager for a fight.
Right, very martial energy.
The logical expectation, reading this chart on July 3rd, would be that we would see aggressive rhetoric in the courts, rash judicial decisions, or some sort of fierce legal combat erupting in the news. But what was the reality of House 9 this week?
Absolute silence.
Nothing.
There were no major superior court rulings. There were no groundbreaking appellate decisions. No massive new constitutional challenges were filed that dominated the news cycle. There was absolutely nothing that would activate or reflect the aggressive martial energy of Pure.
So what does this all mean? Did the oracle just fail? Is the geomantic system flawed? Because an empty house, when you predict a warrior swinging a sword, it's a pretty big miss. If I go to a doctor and they say my x-ray shows a broken femur and I'm doing jumping jacks without pain, the machine is broken.
It's a fair point. But this raises a vital, fascinating question about the limitations of mundane forecasting frameworks. It's about the clash between astrological time and institutional time.
What do you mean?
The oracle isn't necessarily wrong on the energy present, but it is clashing with a rigid institutional reality. Look at the calendar. We are looking at the week of July 6th. This is the dead center of the summer judicial recess in Quebec.
The courts are closed?
Exactly. The courts simply aren't in session to deliver aggressive news. The judges are on vacation. The dockets are essentially empty, save for absolute life-or-death emergencies.
Oh, wow.
The mundane timing structure of a single-week chart struggles immensely when an entire institution has put up a close for the summer sign.
Because there's no outlet for the energy.
Right. The aggressive energy of Puer might very well be brewing in legal chambers. Lawyers might be aggressively drafting fierce constitutional briefs behind closed doors, preparing for the fall session. But because the institution is physically paused, that energy cannot manifest as public news.
That makes total sense.
So structurally, we must grade it as a clean miss for the week, but with an asterisk regarding institutional timing.
You can't have a public legal brawl if the courtroom doors are locked and the judge is at the cottage. Now let's touch briefly on the partial hits because they add texture to the week. House 3, which is communications and local media, had Letitia Joy. The media coverage of the week was incredibly lively and active, but we did have that digital portal crash, which complicates the concept of joy in communications.
Yeah, that's a big spag.
House 5, which covers children, entertainment, and public morale, had Puella, meaning girl or beauty, a figure representing pleasant but transient, superficial morale. But again, the exam portal crash heavily disrupted the morale of the students.
A hit, but a nuanced one.
House 7, which represents open opponents and conflicts, had Fortuna Minor, lesser fortune, which signifies unstable passing luck.
And we saw that with the unions. They gained a transient procedural advantage by elevating their fight to the ILO, but it wasn't a permanent victory. It was a fleeting piece of luck in a long war.
Right. But the most significant partial hit is House 10. House 10 represents the executive government, the premier, the ruling cabinet, and the national reputation. The figure here is tristitia, sorrow, sadness, heaviness.
Now, to be fair to the data, we didn't see the government completely collapse this week.
No.
There was no single fatal scandal that brought the premier to his knees in grief. The government didn't fall. So it's not a perfect, dramatic, catastrophic hit.
True. But let's look at the posture of the executive during these 7 days. The legislature is in recess, so the executive branch can't proactively pass new laws to change the public narrative. Instead, they are entirely on the defensive, reacting to compounding crises.
They are exhausted.
They are fighting 9 major unions representing 1.5 million people on an international stage. They are trying to manage 500,000 hectares of burning forest and coordinate emergency logistics.
While managing public relations.
Yeah, they are facing immense public backlash over the mental health detention law, and they have to explain to furious parents why their multi-million-dollar digital infrastructure failed high schoolers on exam day. And they are doing all of this while sitting 10 weeks away from a major provincial election.
That is a deeply depressed, burdened, heavy executive state. They're essentially playing high-stakes whack-a-mole with provincial crises.
Yeah, they're just reacting.
It perfectly matches the heavy, descending, serious, and isolating nature of Tristitia, even if it wasn't triggered by one singular tragic event. It is a condition of the executive, a posture of grief and burden.
So we have all these individual houses mapped out. But geomancy is a narrative art as much as a mathematical one. It isn't just a collection of isolated symbols sitting in boxes.
Right, there's a flow to it.
The entire chart funnels down into a specific structural sequence called the court. You take the first 12 figures, combine them mathematically, and generate a narrative arc consisting of 2 witnesses, a judge, and a reconciler. This tells us the chronological story of the week from beginning to end.
The narrative arc in this specific chart is breathtakingly accurate to the timeline of the news. We start with the right witness, which is generated from the first half of the chart. This represents the beginning of the matter, what the province carries into the week.
And what was it?
The figure here is Fortuna Minor, lesser fortune. As we discussed, this means an outgoing, dispersing good luck, a momentum or advantage that simply does not hold.
And if we look at the timeline, the week opened on July 6th and 7th with exactly that fleeting energy. The government announces a $25.5 million wetlands investment. Great news.
Very positive.
The PQ immigration pathway reopens, securing vital labor for thousands of businesses.
Yeah.
Excellent. But on the exact same day, the wildfire data explodes and they have to lock down half the province with a fire ban.
The luck runs out.
The next morning, the student portal crashes and the unions drop the international ILO complaint. The good news evaporates instantly. It is literally fortune that does not hold.
Which leads directly into the left witness, representing the unfolding of the week, the core developmental dynamic. The figure mathematically generated here is emissio, loss, release, things slipping away.
And what happens in the middle of the week? The U.S. firm KKR buys a third of the province's wind energy capacity, a massive structural loss of energy sovereignty.
Yep.
The ISQ releases data projecting a 4.5% population drain from Montreal, a loss of demographic mass. And the fires consume hundreds of thousands of hectares of natural resources, loss of territory. The middle of the week is defined entirely by emissio.
Then the mathematics of the chart combine the 2 witnesses to form the judge. The judge represents the verdict of the week, the culmination of the energies. The judge here is conjunctio, conjunction or union.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It is a fundamentally neutral figure. It means things come together, parties meet, intersections occur, but without a clear victory or defeat for either side.
Unions meet international labor bodies. U.S. capital meet Quebec wind infrastructure. The government's pre-election employment statistics meet a contested, chaotic political reality.
Right, everyone is coming to the table.
Everything converges, deals are struck, complaints are filed, but no one delivers a knockout blow. The week culminates in a massive intersection of forces without resolution.
And finally, we look at the reconciler. This is found by combining the judge with the very first figure in House 1. It represents the final settlement, the ultimate end of the matter as the week closes out.
And the reconciler here is Letitia. joy.
And unexpected brightening after extreme difficulty.
And on July 12th, the final day of the week, what happens? The National Assembly Speaker is elected President of the Assemblée Parlementaire de la Francophonie.
A major diplomatic win.
After a grueling week of fires, portal crashes, lost sovereignty, and union battles, the week ends on a note of genuine international institutional joy. The geomantic arc traced the exact chronological unfolding of the week's news, fading advantage, moving through genuine loss, arriving at a neutral convergence, and ending in an unexpected institutional honor.
The structural elegance of that narrative generation is remarkable, but there is another structural element we need to analyze called the way of points.
Right. Explain the way of points.
The way of points tracks the movement of a specific elemental force through the chart to find a hidden root cause. Think of it like a contact tracer trying to find patient zero in a pandemic.
That's a great way to put it.
It follows the structural links back to see what singular event caused all the subsequent chaos. But in this chart, the way of points resolved to none. It couldn't find a root cause. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a failure of the system.
It sounds like the oracle got confused and gave up.
On the contrary, it is a brilliant, highly accurate structural success. If the way of points had successfully pointed to a single house, say, House 4, the wildfires, it would imply that the fires were the root cause of everything else that happened that week.
Oh, I see.
It would suggest that the burning forests somehow caused the unions to file a complaint, caused the student portal to crash, and caused the government to sell wind farms to an American equity firm. But we know that's not true.
Right. A $6 billion corporate acquisition isn't triggered because a server crashed during high school exam results. They are entirely separate timelines.
Exactly. These are unconnected events colliding in a single 7-day window. They arise from distinct policy decisions, environmental factors, and institutional trajectories.
There is no single patient zero.
Exactly. By resolving to none, the chart accurately reported that there is no master driver this week. It is a multi-front reality. The contact tracer found that there wasn't one single contagion. There were 5 separate outbreaks happening simultaneously.
That is a phenomenal way to understand that mechanic. Let's talk about the lots, because this is where the chart gets almost poetic. Geomancy calculates 2 special points based on the distribution of the figures. The part of spirit, which signifies the deeper intention, the animating purpose, or the will of the society, and the part of fortune, which signifies where material rescue, tangible benefit, or salvation lies.
And in this chart, both of these lots landed in the exact same place, House 12.
The House of Carcer. The locked, hidden institutional sphere.
This is one of the most profound implications in the entire reading. When both the part of spirit and the part of fortune fall into House 12 under the figure of prison, it means that the province's deepest intention and its ultimate material rescue are completely inaccessible to the general public.
They are locked away.
They are locked away in hospitals, prisons, covert negotiations, and hidden bureaucracies.
We saw this vividly with the part of spirit, the animating intention of the province. It manifested most clearly through Bill 23. The state's legislative will was expressing itself through the power to physically enclose human beings in psychiatric institutions without their consent.
The deepest intention of the government was, quite literally, carcer, confinement.
And the part of fortune, the material rescue, was also hidden away. The PQ immigration pathway reopening is a massive material benefit. It rescues thousands of businesses desperate for workers, and it rescues temporary workers seeking stability.
It wasn't public.
No, that rescue didn't happen on a public debate stage. It happened deep within the hidden administrative bureaucracy of the immigration ministry. It is a benefit flowing from a concealed, locked sphere. The chart is screaming that the society's peril and its salvation are trapped in the exact same hidden room.
Which brings us to the final fascinating layer of this deep dive, the Girard overlay.
Yes.
A quick scholarly note here for accuracy. While this astro-geomantic method of mapping planets to figures is often attributed to Girard de Cremona, later scholarly corrections, particularly noted by experts like Stephen Skinner, point to Girard of Sabianeta as the proper source for this specific technique.
Okay, good to know.
It involved generating a geomantic figure for the ascendant, using that to lock in the zodiac signs for the houses, and then mathematically placing the traditional 7 planets into those houses based on a specific algorithm.
And when you ran the math for this chart using Girard de Sabianeta's method, you found something incredibly rare and startling, a chart without a single champion.
If we connect this to the broader philosophy of classical astrology, a planet is strongest, most capable of doing good when it is in its domicile, the sign it naturally rules, like a king in his own castle, or its exaltation, a sign where it is treated as an honored, powerful guest.
Right, they have power.
In this entire chart for Quebec, using the traditional 7-planet scheme, not a single planet is in domicile or exaltation. The Sun, Jupiter, Venus, and the Moon are peregrine wandering without special strength or resources.
And the others.
And Saturn, Mars, and Mercury are in detriment or fall actively weakened, corrupted, or exiled.
So what does a championless chart actually mean for a society when no planetary force has inherent dignity?
It means that every acting force in that society during that week is either weakened, constrained, or merely neutral. The government is strained, hidden communications are chaotic, and the best available energies, the wandering planets, are just mild.
They don't have enough leverage.
They have no deep roots, they have no fortress to fall back on.
But wait, let's complicate that, because we just spent 10 minutes talking about House 2 and House 11 having Fortuna Major, the greater fortune. The Treasury and the legislature were incredibly strong on paper. How can they be strong if there are no champions?
And that is exactly the profound warning the Girard overlay provides. The financial and legislative strength shown by Fortuna Major is purely geomantic. It is structural momentum, but it is not supported by any underlying planetary dignity.
So it's an illusion.
Not an illusion, but vulnerable. The planets are essentially saying, yes, you have this massive influx of money, and yes, you passed your law with absolute authority, but there is no champion sustaining it. It means the good news is inherently precarious. It comes with massive qualifications.
So the $6 billion wind deal is great for the ledger, but you lose your sovereign control over the infrastructure. The unemployment numbers dropping is good, but it's structurally uneven across the regions. The APF presidency is a great honor for the speaker, but the legislature is in recess, so they can't actually use the momentum for anything practical. There is no uncompromised strength.
Precisely. Every single victory that week comes with an asterisk. Every gain has a hidden cost. That is the reality of a championless chart.
Let's tally this up. The final scorecard for this real-world retrospective stress test. We had 7 strong exact hits matching the news to the houses perfectly. We had 4 partial hits that accurately reflected the tone, if not a specific explosive event. And we had 1 explicable miss, purely due to the institutional calendar of the judicial summer recess.
By any standard of mundane analysis, predictive modeling, or historical assessment, that is an incredibly high-performing chart.
It really proves the power of retro-geomancy. By testing these ancient, mathematically derived figures against rigid, uncompromising modern news data, we prove that this isn't just cold reading.
Right, it's not a parlor trick.
It's not just vague psychological profiling where you nod along to generalizations. We are looking at a structural language of reality.
We really are.
The figures didn't just guess that bad things would happen to Quebec. They knew the physical land would be locked down by uncontrolled fire, mapped by Carcer with Mars in fall.
Yeah.
They knew the institutional communications would collapse, mapped by Mercury in double debility. They knew the money would flow in while the underlying sovereignty drained away, mapped by Fortuna Major, sitting over the Cauda Draconis overlay.
It is a profound validation of the methodology. It forces us to respect the architecture of these ancient systems.
It really does.
The practitioners who developed geomancy were observing the mechanics of time, pressure, and event manifestation with a level of precision that we are only just relearning how to read. They built an X-ray machine that still works centuries later.
So, after this incredible exploration, what does this all mean for you? We've explored a week where a modern society experienced an intense juxtaposition of forces. 500,000 hectares of vital boreal forest burned and were locked down, while billions of dollars shuffled seamlessly between international ledgers.
Total contradiction.
The physical foundation cracked, but the bank account swelled. The identity drained, but the laws passed.
It leaves us with a lingering contemplation derived directly from the geometry of those final lots we discussed.
Yeah.
The chart showed us unequivocally that both the hidden danger, the power of forced, obscured confinement, and the hidden help, the institutional rescue of the workforce, lived in the exact same locked house, House 12, under the heavy, restrictive figure of prison.
So the question we leave you to mull over until next time is this. If your society's ultimate salvation and its deepest, most restrictive peril are kept behind the exact same locked door, how do you open it to get the medicine without unleashing the monster?
That's the real puzzle.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.